I'm Ashley Gooseman, and welcome to another edition of Disaster Empire Quick Views, where we talk with inspiring leaders, thought leaders, and innovators in the resilience space. And so I am excited to have Todd DeVoe with me today to really talk about his background in emergency management and all the amazing work that he's doing. Before we jump in, just want to give a chance for Todd to talk about his background for those who aren't familiar with him. Todd, can you go ahead and jump in?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show, Ashley. I really appreciate it. And I love the work that you're doing in this space because I think it's really important to have many voices and many views.
Thank you.
My history of emergency management, I came from public safety. And like a lot of people, sort of fell into the job of emergency management. And I'm here on the West Coast, originally from the East Coast. And I started working some of the larger fires that we had here in Southern California. And I kind of fell in love with the management side of the job and moved from response over to management. And then my first paid job as an emergency manager, what I mean by that is where it was my real job, my day-to-day, was with the city of Dana Point. If you can see the little plaque back there, the city of Dana Point, where I really cut my teeth quickly with the nuclear power plant that was down the street. And it really gets you into this mindset of that emergency can happen at any given time. And so it's not just fires, it's not just earthquake, but that really got us trained. And we had to do a couple exercises a year, helped out with another nuclear power plant, and they're really learning what that means and evacuation, what that truly means and all those type of things. So as a guy who's breaking into emergency management, that was the best first job that I could ever have in emergency management. And then from there, I moved on to another jurisdiction, worked there for a few years, and then I got into higher education, where I learned another aspect of emergency management, right? And then I started teaching as well, and that's kind of where I'm at today. And I really find my passion today is in researching issues that are happening in emergency management and teaching the next generation that's coming up behind. I mean, I'm an older guy now, and my years are numbered, and we need to get new, fresh ideas that are coming in, and that's why I love teaching. So that's where I'm at today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for doing that. I, among others, are talking about who's going to replace us, right? We're not quite ready to retire, but I think a lot of us are talking about, okay, looking around at conferences, et cetera, like there's a lot of us with gray hairs and not so much of the younger folks. And what do we do about this? So thank you so much for your contribution and making that happen. Really appreciate that. And before we get into more of our conversation, do you have a fun fact that you want to share with the audience for people to get to know you a little bit more? That for those of you who might know you now, and for those who are just meeting you, I always love to share a little bit about people's interests and backgrounds.
Yeah, so one of the things that I love to do is I love to do anything with competitive targets. And what I mean by that is I love darts, I shoot arrows. I've even gone with my son and done stuff with airsoft, things like that. So if there's a target involved and we're shooting precision, that type of stuff, I love to do it. I don't know why. I don't do anything else with it except for just aim at different targets around and see what we can do. So that's one of my hobbies.
Great. It sounds like fun. I know there's a huge airsoft community out there, so I'm sure some people are cheering you on. Hey, getting into your view of the work right now, and I know you've been closely aligned with emergency management, really wanted to ask you about what you've been doing in this space. And you got jumped into the social media space. You've got a podcast. You're doing, live shares on LinkedIn. How did that come about, and why was that important to you?
Yeah, so it's been an evolution for me, and I started my podcast originally, the first one I did, because I taught. And so I'll rewind it here in a second, but and so I needed a way to bring guests into my classroom because we moved from a traditional classroom to online. And my friend of mine talked me into doing podcasting, and that's where it was. And the reason why I picked the name is we developed this concept, and I'm no longer, I sold the name with Ian Weekly, was we started this idea back in the early 2000s, with the idea of having like a one place to bring emergency management news, basically. And it didn't really pan out, and then like the news aggregator came out from Google, which sort of took that away. We just sort of put that to bed, and then I owned the website for many years. And then when this idea of the podcast came out, we just used that name. There was no particular reason why we used that name outside the fact that I already had it. So moving forward, I really started to go, there has to be more than just the podcast, right? And you sort of did it backwards, right? You had your blog first and then moving.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I like to write. I write, I do research for schools, for teaching, and for also my PhD program. And so about a year ago in November, or a year ago now, since this is coming out in November, I launched a Substack called the Emergency Management Network. And the idea behind that is, again, to bring different writers, different ideas to one location for people to share. And, we launched this March, we launched the Emergency Management Network podcast, which is really just a quick, really 6 minute to 10 minute, maybe 15, depending on what we're talking about, rundown of what's going on for the week, and some thoughts on leadership and emergency management. And that's what we're doing now. And so this Substack is a newsletter platform, which really kind of cool. There's some really neat things going on over there, so you should check it out. Not just on mine, but others as well. And so that's the idea of what we're doing. And so one of the problems that I've recognized for emergency management is a lot of the literature that we have is written from either the sociological point of view or maybe like the risk management point of view. But there wasn't a lot of emergency management driven content out there. And if you look today, you'll see, the PhDs and stuff are all sociology, anthropology, a lot of some geology, some of those sciences like that, but not a lot of emergency management. And I'm just as guilty, right? Because I'm a public policy guy. But my focus, all my research is on emergency management issues. And not saying that like disaster research has to be done by emergency managers, but we need to have that voice. And so that was one of the things that's driven me as well, to have those writings being done by emergency managers and having those conversations of where do we go with studying disasters and studying risks. And I think we really need to have this term that my friend uses a lot, Dan Scott. He uses the concept of pracademic, right? The practitioner who moves into academics, right? And I do. I like that too. And so I love to see practitioners that are now getting older like me, who do not want to be woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning due to a earthquake and a fire or something like in some other location and run to it, where we can be a little bit slower in our response, have a cup of coffee. Yeah, I have to roll out, comb my hair first, the hair I have left, and then, have a cup of coffee and then get on the road. Being woken up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning for a disaster is no longer my body does not like that, so being able to, but going and take a look at those younger guys and gals that are responding and doing it and seeing how we can help improve communications, whether that's always a problem or what's going on, and really study the human interaction. You have Daniel Ulrich from Northeastern University, Daniel, that he is doing some really great work. Disaster Research University out of Delaware is still doing great work. So still really pockets of excellent scholarship being done on emergency management, but we need to share that with the world. And this is kind of what my focus in life now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And this is exactly why I wanted to have you on, because the genesis of Disaster Empire for me was really not only, my blogs and having a place for a voice, but sharing everyone else's that's out there. I mean, there's so many amazing practitioners that are out there doing things that none of us have, or others of us don't have good understanding of. So thank you so much for sharing that. And please send me the links and I'll put them in the comments below for the audience so they can check that out, because those are such great resources and good things to know about. And I learned a few things, that I wasn't aware of are out there in terms of resources as well. But that, just to follow up on what you were saying about emergency management practice, what do you think are the biggest challenges for emergency managers, out there today? Because we're hearing about the severity, right, of events. The cadence doesn't seem to be slowing down. I mean, there's no shortage of work, unfortunately, out there. I always want to try to work myself out of a job, but it's not happening. So for emergency managers on the day-to-day, I can imagine just the challenges that they're facing currently.
One of the things that I struggle with is this whole definition of what do we do as emergency managers. And you ask 20 emergency managers, there's going to be 20 different answers,
Yeah.
right? So, but it's a little more than that. What I see with emergency management happening is you have the people that are in the trenches that are struggling to keep their head above water, that are checking boxes just to make sure those are done, and are like, yeah, I'm doing emergency management. And you get like people who aren't emergency management professionals. I think, and I want to really differentiate between this, right? So there's the emergency management person who's filling that role. They're collateral duty. They're a police officer, firefighter, or whatever, EMT, or how I started. And just checking that box going, okay, I did that drill, I did this thing, I did that. And at the end of the day, you go, okay, what'd you do as emergency manager? Right? You might have done some exercise stuff, you might have done this. And they're not really like focusing on community building, resiliency. Right? And so when you ask them about that, they're like, oh, I don't have time. And you go, well, that's what you should be doing. These other checkbox things that you're doing that you can, okay, am I state compliant? Am I FEMA compliant? Am I this compliant? Am I getting that grant? That's cool. What am I buying? What gizmo am I purchasing with this grant money coming in? Great. But you're not building resiliency to that disaster. And I'm from the Northeast, right? That's where I grew up. And every couple of years in October, we get this really bad ice storm. And all the power goes out for a couple of weeks, right? And it's like, oh, it makes the news. It's normally because ice comes in and it breaks all the cables. I'll tell you, people in the Northeast are resilient people because they know what's coming, right? And my dad owned delis. And when I was a kid working at the deli, every time we're going to have an ice storm or snowstorm or something, weather's getting bad, the bread and the milk would go away. Right.
Yep.
And people just buy bread and milk. I don't know why it's bread and milk. It just was bread and milk. That's what it was. And boom, it was maybe some cheese too. Right. Gone. Right. All that stuff. No one, it couldn't keep on the shelves.
Yeah.
Right. And so because they knew that they're going to be stuck in their house for a week. Right. And they need to have food for their kids and for their family. And they're like, okay, it's just going to happen. Right. Cold weather comes, we change our tires from the regular tires, the snow tires. We, make sure that the radiator is flushed and full of new, radiator fluid, things that we do to prepare for the snow. Right. And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm not back east anymore. I'm assuming those things are still happening, but like here in great weather where I'm in Southern California, people are like, it's going to happen. Oh, and then like when the earthquake occurs and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have food. I don't have water. I don't have these things. And they look to government for it. And the government's like, well, we have some, but we don't have enough for everybody. Right. How do you do this? So you have to do this by building that resilient community and working with organizations that are going to, not just you, to amplify your voice, right? You are one person. But working with those other organizations to amplify the voice. And I think this is what we are doing wrong. As emergency managers, we are not working with community groups to get them prepared for and be resilient for disasters. If you have them like in hurricane areas, have them tornado areas back east with the northeasterns and nor'easterns and ice storms that are coming, we know these things are going to occur. But when you're in the pretty good areas such as like California, Texas, and places that weather comes and goes, but we have fires. Right? We live in the WUI, right? That's going to happen. But people just aren't ready. And so you need to work with the people, and it's going to make your life so much easier as an emergency manager when that time comes. And building trust, right? Building trust between you and the community is critical, because when we ask somebody to leave their home, right, and saying, hey, this event's coming, it's going to harm you, please leave. and they don't, it's because there's some sort of disconnect between the trust of what you're telling them and what they're visualizing, right? And we lose people because of that. People die because they don't trust the government, right? They don't trust the words that are coming out. And so that's what you need to be doing as emergency managers, is building resilient communities by working with organizations and building trust with your community. And that's where we're missing that boat.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I'm right there with you in terms of community resilience and, thinking about from the mantra of emergency management, right? All disasters start local and they end local. But it seems like we've kind of missed, like you said, we have that disconnect going on today. Why do you think that is? And how would you define resilience?
Ooh, that's one of my favorite questions, define resilience. I think resilience is a squishy word, right? And I've moved, even though I've done like many speeches on resilience, right? You can find me on YouTube on doing speeches on resiliency and what it means. It's a goalpost that moves, right? And what I mean by this is like, there's even like a makeup company that talks about being resilient. Like, really? Come on, right? So that's why I say it's a squishy word, right? There's all sorts of definitions to it. Now, if you use the definitions from ecology, right? It's the idea of an organism, and we can replace organism with community that is bouncing back from stresses that are put onto it back to normal, right? Or a sense of normalcy. But I don't think we ever really bounce back to normal, right? We bounce back to what everybody calls the new normal. I mean, if you think about COVID, we have this new normal. There's things that are out there that are never going to go away, right? After 9/11, the new normal of having, you're going through security the way we've never gone through security before. Right. The new normal, taking your shoes off if you don't have your, I was about to say fast pass. That's Disneyland. If you don't have your TSA pre-check, right? Maybe a fast pass too. You don't take your shoes off. I don't know. I don't buy those. But the idea here is, right, is you go through those things, and that's new normal, right? But does that really build a resilient community again? Maybe, but I don't think so, right? So I took Nicholas Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, and I really digested that book and said, how do we move from the concept of resilience, right, and add robustness to it? I'm gonna add personal responsibility to it, and add the idea that when something occurs to you, when you get put under the stressors, not only do you grow back to normalcy, you go back to be better, right? And I was an athlete, and you can't tell today, but I was at one point. And when we would work out, right, you'd work out, and then you would go to the gym, and you'd burn, you feel the burn, right? And you're doing your reps, and you're getting bigger and stronger, and that's your body breaking down a little bit, right? And it's building back, but not to a new normal. It's building back to better, right? And so when I was playing international rugby, we would work out and be stronger. So when next time you hit somebody, you would be stronger into that. And every time you did that, you became stronger and better, right? As my friend says, we're stronger, faster, better. I was a pig. I was a prop. I was never fast, right? But I was always stronger, right? We get so stronger and better. Let's move the faster.
That'll work.
Okay. But that's the idea of like, can we do that with community resiliency? Can we have somebody who comes in and goes, okay, how do we become better? And I'm going to do one more sports analogy. There's this guy who I'm following right now. He plays running back for the Browns. His name is Chubb. I forget his first name. And I was watching this little thing with him on a video, and this guy he's not a huge dude, right? As for the football standards goes, I think he's like 5'11". And he is, and he's squatting like 1,000 pounds. And you watch him play, and you watch his legs just keep moving and churning and moving and churning as he hits into the big, 250, 300 pound, lineman, and he just pulls through him because his legs are strong. That's what I think of when you say resilience, is that guy who's putting the work in before the disaster occurs, right? When he smacks into the disaster, it doesn't stop him, and he just burns through it, and he gets his touchdowns. That's what we have to do as emergency managers, is teach people how to be resilient, how to build back every time there's a small disaster, a small emergency, that they can become faster and stronger and better each time.
So, Todd, building on that from what you were saying and thinking about the last few years with COVID and other events, what do you suggest for emergency managers? How can they build that community resilience? You talked a little bit earlier about maybe what they shouldn't be focusing on quite as much, or maybe using as their goalposts, their milestones. What do you think they should do to be able to help build that resilience in their communities?
Get out of the office. Get out of the office and meet people. Get out of the office. There's a reason why everybody knows what firefighter, police officers, and paramedics do, right? Because, we show up in these, shiny, bright cars with flashing lights and, everybody goes, oh, look at the ambulance, look at the fire truck, look at the police car. It's awesome, right? But you go, what does an emergency manager do? And nobody knows, right? And it doesn't have to be, you can go to schools, right? And it doesn't have to be the, with all the stuff. It doesn't have to be all at the level of politics when you go talk to kids at school. They understand being prepared. My daughter, at the age of 4, understood what it was to be prepared for disaster. Not maybe because I'm here with her, but it's also she learned it in school, right? Yeah. She learned duck, cover, and hold on. She understood what that meant. She understood. There's a little vignette that I have of her where she's talking about being prepared and the reason why. And, it's at her level. And she said, she goes, the reason why I want to be prepared is because I want to be with my family, right? I want to be safe. And she goes, and I want to stay hydrated. And that's why I use that stay hydrated at the end of my show, because she said that when she's 4. She's 10 now. She'd probably kill me for telling that story. Right. But the idea here is that kids pick it up, right? They understand it at their level. They understand they want to be safe. They want to be with the family, and they don't want to be hurt. Right. And so I remember Disney had a video that was out around the same time, and it was these 2 little kids called Lou and Lou Safety Patrol. You don't see it. You might be able to find it on YouTube. Okay. And they run around their house. They prepare their house for different things, not just disasters, but all different emergencies. And one of them was to build an emergency kit. And they ran around their house in their garage, and they got the flashlight and Band-Aids and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, you're talking to the right crowd. We need to be talking to that K through, at least K through 5th grade, right, about this prior to it. And California State did this research and found that 4th grade was the prime grade to be talking about disaster preparedness to, because they're still young enough to where they're moldable, or they can be molded, and they're not old enough to where they think we're all a bunch of old crazy people like 6th graders are, right? No longer cool at 6th grade for them to come in. But the 4th grade seems to be the prime spot. And they have a program today where, and you can find it at the California Cal OES, and they're happy to share the information, where you get to where it's a full curriculum, where teachers can talk about disaster preparedness, and then they do a virtual EOC tour of the state EOC. They have a message from the governor. They have a message from the emergency director of emergency management. And it's really right there. We need to be doing more of that, not less, right? And whether you use the state of California's version of it, or you develop your own. And I know some jurisdictions have multiple schools. Well, make it a week, long thing. Get your city behind it. Get your school district involved, and do a disaster preparedness week. We have the month of September. Sometimes it's a little bit too early in the curriculum for some schools to do it. You can move that around. April's a really good time too. Near the end of the school year for some, because there's like hurricanes for preparedness month. But there's always things you can celebrate and not make it scary, and make people and get them that young. What I would love to see is kids that want to grow up to be emergency managers, and we don't have, I want to be a cop, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a doctor, a nurse, a vet, whatever. But no one really talks about emergency management at those young ages. That would be if I could do anything in the world that I could snap my fingers, I would love to see young kids know what emergency management is, and that's a career field they want to go into.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, if kids were to learn about what they do and helping to protect the community and then help fix things, if you will, kind of bring it down to their level, when things do go wrong, I think there are a lot of kids who might be interested in doing that. But like you said, it's just not a choice. And I know many of us as practitioners talk about, we were voluntold or we fell into this. We never knew that it was, a career path that you could take in all its variations. So thank you much for sharing that. And I really agree with that disconnect that we have right now, and wanting to become part of the community. The emergency manager should become part of the community and really interact with them in order to help people prepare. So that's such a strong message.
Thank you.
Hey,
absolutely.
we could talk all day, and I wish we did have more time, but I know we need to jump. But I wanted to thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your background, your vision, and your thoughts. It's always great to hear you speak. And I hope I can have you back on at some point and talk more. That would be fabulous. I'd love to hear more and explore about, the journey that you're taking. We were talking a little bit before we jumped on about all the work you're doing in the education space, which I'm guessing a lot of people aren't aware of. And I think it's tremendous. And you're really walking the walk and talking the talk. But before we wrap, can you share, is there anything else that you want to touch on, that you want to hit on today that we didn't already?
Yeah, real quick in higher education, we're seeing more emergency management programs coming out, and there's this debate. I call it the great internet debate, or at least the great LinkedIn debate of, whether emergency managers should be educated in college or not, and all this kind of stuff. Like, if you're absolutely right, there are people that could be great practitioners when it comes to that didn't go to school, right? There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Right. But the idea of having the education isn't necessary just for the job of what you're doing today. Right, it isn't just for filling out those check boxes, right, and making sure your EOC's up and running and the computers are turned on. Those are easy jobs to do. I don't say easy jobs, but those are jobs that you can do without a lot of education. Well, my point about it is, with the education side of it, is having theory and understanding that and developing it to the next level, and being able to go and speak to Congress, and be able to speak to your elected officials, and be able to speak articulately to the community. That is why I really stress on higher education for emergency managers. Not saying that you can't do it when, I appreciate everything. And heck, I started right out of the Navy with going through school. So I get it. It's not that you're less than, but it's just saying having that additional understanding of theory, and that's why it's critical. And that's why I think emergency management education programs are critical for us to support. And that's all. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And to the audience, thank you for being with us today. And please don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get notification every time we have one of these great conversations. Thank you. Thanks, Todd.
No problem. Thank you so much.